Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me and allowing me to continue to be your daily advocate. If you're new here or you're not subscribed for any reason, please do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe button. Thank you to all of you who have been watching and following me for so long. It truly means a lot, and I'm glad that I can be this person.
Jim, for you today, I'm going to share with you some of Attorney John Deaton's most recent thoughts having to do with the SEC versus Ripple case, and oh my gosh, there's a lot in this. Where to even begin? Just to kind of summarize some of what ends up getting discussed within this video. There were old videos of Gary Gensler before he was SEC chair talking about how he seemed to believe that it was okay to quote-unquote send a message to participants within the crypto space by suing, yes, and essentially litigation, enforcement by regulation. And also thinking back to these 63 emails associated with the Billy Boy Hinman Ethereum free pass speech, these emails that the SEC is doing everything they can to prevent these emails getting in the hands of the team at Ripple. Well, I've been asking, as is everybody else in the space, why are they fighting so hard and so desperately specifically for this? Because they don't treat every aspect of the case, obviously, in this manner. Why are they fighting so hard for this? Is it perhaps the case that there's exculpatory evidence within, having to do with comments? Who knows? It's just speculation, but I think it's very reasonable speculation. Could it be the case that the SEC wasn't quite sure what to make of XRP as XRP as security? Now, was it in the past? There's all sorts of questions that they had to have been struggling with. And then, if that ended up being the case, if that's actually what the SEC thought in these emails leading up to Ethereum free pass speech, then how the hell is it that Ripple could have known that what they were doing was wrong? So it plays right into their fair notice defense, among other things here. And I'll tell you one thing that I'm wondering. Do you think there's any chance in the world, perhaps, that it wasn't initially just Ethereum that was included in the speech? Is there any chance at all that in an earlier draft, XRP would have been included in the Ethereum free pass speech? Is there any chance in the world? I'm not saying that I think that's necessarily the case, but I will share with you as we go through this thread the reason that I'm asking it, and it has to do with something that Ethereum co-founder and Consensus founder Joe Lubin had to say the day of the Ethereum free pass speech. And it seems pretty clear, and there's plenty of evidence that John Deaton shares in this thread, indicating that it looks like Joe Lubin's pretty well connected, pretty well in the know, more than just friends with people over at the SEC. It's pretty deep, but anyway, plenty to unpack here. But before going any further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I'm not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say, right? I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. So in we go, some of the latest comments from Attorney John Deaton on Twitter. Why haven't the trade associations or crypto leaders spoken out against the SEC or appeared as amicus on behalf of the industry? When Ethereum was given a free pass, was part of the deal that Ripple and XRP would be the sacrificial lamb? Have you listened to Gary Gensler lately? He talks about picking a high-profile project and going after it as a way to send a message to the entire industry. Gensler met with Clayton in March of 2018. Gensler was unaware Ether investors met with Hinman asking for the Ethereum free pass speech. Or just the Ethereum free pass. Watch the video. Gensler scoffed at there's a quote. He scoffed at a group of venture capitalists went into the SEC. So this is true, and I actually have mentioned this on the channel before. Indeed, a group of venture capitalists went to the SEC, and this is before Gary Gensler was working at the SEC, mind you, and he basically wasn't having any of it back then. And so here's the quote from Gary Gensler back then. They're sort of saying, believe us, we get you, we're with you, SEC, but we have a bunch of clients who are going to evolve to be a consumable token. Sound familiar? And so what he's talking about right there is the idea of utility resulting from Ethereum and the Ether token. And that's why one of the clips too, Joe Lubin's highlighted just a little bit further down, but I'll just mention it now because I want to make this comment, make sure I don't forget this. In one of these clips, Joe Lubin was saying there's a reason that we never marketed Ether as a cryptocurrency. We marketed it as a sort of digital gas. And so fueling the network, right? And so I sit there and I'm just looking like, my God. So you think if you just call it something different, even if it has all of the attributes of what would be a security, just call it something different and somehow you're in the clear. Somehow that does it. That's why it's amazing that it made it as far in the clear as it has to this point. And still, of course, the SEC could end up coming, after the founders of Ethereum. They still could, because the SEC hasn't officially given it a free pass. It's just amazing how it was positioned as having gotten that free pass from the SEC. Anyway, John Deaton continues here. Gensler also said, quote, "I kind of don't think this is going to work," end quote. And then he also said, this is another quote, "The market needs clarity and the uncertainty as to whether Ether is or is not a security." And so you can pause there to note, this is Gensler, and he stands now, mind you, as SEC Supreme Leader and Dictator Kim Jong Gensler now. He insists that there's nothing but sufficient clarity in the space. But then you go back to him from a few years ago, and he's saying things like the market needs clarity. He literally said, in fact, he even said that explicitly about XRP. Explicitly about XRP. Anyway, John Deaton continues. Gensler concluded that the uncertainty regarding ETH, quote, "could exist for months, but at some point in time it is worthwhile to settle that down or have it fall into the courts," end quote. We know 2 months after Gensler made those comments, Hinman settled it with the Ethereum Free Pass speech. On May 12, 2018, Joseph Lubin said the following. "We need mechanisms to allow for fundraising and token sales despite the fear, uncertainty, and doubt you've heard over these many months. We are making great strides in helping the people that make those decisions understand," end quote. And so that's the video. That's what I was referencing just a moment ago. That's where he said, "Well, we weren't marketing Ethereum ever as a cryptocurrency. It's just fuel for the network, effectively. So again, just call it something different. Okay, don't worry about the attributes." It's not a very good argument for it. But anyway, the video was 1 month, where he was saying that video was 1 month before the Hinman speech. And on May 21st, 2018, Tom Lee, who's at Fundstrat, and he's also an ex-JP Morgan guy, he makes an elliptical comment that the SEC will declare Ethereum not a security, causing a confused CNBC host to ask for him to explain. How did he know? Did he see a draft? And it is amazing how all these people, they all seem to know each other, they all seem to know what's going on and what's about to happen surrounding Ethereum. Isn't that a bit curious? John continues. Tom Lee is a former JP Morgan executive, and we know that JP Morgan has been with Lubin and Ethereum from the beginning. Watch this interview with, who is this here? Angie Lau and Joe Lubin regarding Consensus's purchase of JP Morgan's Quorum. Lubin explained the following. Here's a quote. "Consensus and JP Morgan have been very friendly and collaborative for quite some time. We've interacted with them roughly from the start. We started to interact with them in a really concerted way around the time of the advent of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance," end quote. John continues. "It doesn't get more clear when Lubin explained the connection and involvement of JP Morgan when he said the following." Here's another quote. "We were two of the major drivers of that initiative and have been two of the major drivers of activity inside the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance since launch," end quote. So how was Tom Lee so sure? Reasonable questions, right? How is it? So there seem to be some connections. He seems to be highly confident that SEC was going to be totally okay with Ethereum from a legal perspective. Well, how is that? How can you have that level of confidence to say that on national television on CNBC? Interesting, right? John continues. "I've followed Tom Lee and he's absolutely brilliant, but I doubt he's clairvoyant. On May 24th, 2018, Lubin said the following. We are able to issue tokens that are not securities, and describes apparent details of the Hinman speech almost a month before it is made." So folks, there's a reason that so many people in our community are speculating that Joe Lubin knew what the contents of that speech would be. He knew leading up to it, and he was privy to, because he knows people that were involved in this, he was privy to some of the specifics as the drafts were being circulated within the SEC. There's a reason people within our community are speculating that. And John continues. Less than 2 weeks before the speech, Gary Gensler said the following. There is a strong legal case that Ether is a security. They were careful, they were clever, but they still, I think, were a duck and waddles and quacks like a duck, end quote. So there you go. So this goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, where Joe Lubin's like, well, no, we're just not going to call our security a cryptocurrency. We're calling it fuel, right? That's the strategy there. And Gary Gensler's pointing out something which, frankly, it is reasonable. If it still has all of the attributes, in this case, Gary Gensler says, if it walks like a duck, waddles like a duck, quacks like a duck, all that crap, well, what is it then? Not a security? It doesn't make functional sense. That's what he said. And so he was happy to share his opinion back then, before he was SEC chair, but now not willing to talk about it, which is interesting. Does he still feel the same way? Does he still feel that there's not sufficient clarity? Well, we know he says that there is sufficient clarity now that he's here. So what the hell changed? Nothing. That's why it's so disturbing, right? John continues. On June 5th, 2018, Mike Novogratz, with whom Vitalik Buterin arranged a purchase of 500,000 Ethereum tokens for speculation purposes in 2015, said the following. I bet dimes to donuts, that's the quote, bet dimes to donuts, that the SEC will say that Ether probably was a security, but it isn't anymore. That was 9 days before the speech. Folks, what did Bill Hinman ultimately say? It was something to the effect of setting aside any sort of sales back, so on and so forth, so referencing effectively the ICO. Setting that aside, we don't see any sort of common enterprise, any sort of core entity surrounding the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I still want to know why he was okay with setting that aside. But Novogratz here, ahead of the speech, effectively said the same thing. So how could he know that? Well, go a little bit further, you'll see why. It's because everything's so incestuous. All these people know one another. Check this out as we go further. You'll see what I'm talking about. Like Tom Lee, did Novogratz see a draft of the speech in advance? If he or Tom Lee hadn't seen a draft, were they informed what Hinman was going to say or not say by someone with knowledge? What about Lubin? Do we think he may have shared some inside info he was learning? Mike Novogratz admitted as much on July 17th, 2018. He explained Lubin was a college roommate of his and is, quote, a wonderful source to me and we collaborate, end quote. So think about this. 9 days ahead of the speech, apparently Mike Novogratz is clairvoyant too, and he can see all of this. And he just happens to have been college buddies with Joe Lubin. He's got all of this information here. There's a reason that the XRP people in the XRP community are just like our brains have exploded like infinity number of times, basically uncovering all this stuff. And that's why it gets to the point where it's just like offensive when some people, despite all the research, all the facts that we put out here, some people still call this just conspiracy theory stuff. I'm saying, like, God, we're just talking about facts here. And yes, fine, there's some speculation associated with that, but the speculation, it's based on verified facts. And it's not wild stuff here. It's not wild. In fact, the most wild stuff is the verifiable facts. That stuff's more wild, I would argue. John Deaton continues. So he added that, this is from Novogratz, talking to enough people in the ecosystem who are talking to the regulators every day. Boom, right there. So who would that be? Well, Joe Lubin sure as hell is talking to the regulators, SEC. He's a person within the ecosystem. Well, how about that? John Deaton continues. 9 days before the Hinman speech, Novogratz stated that his gut feeling was that the SEC would take out a token and a promoter to send a message to the market. Doesn't that sound similar to the Gary Gensler approach? So think about this, folks. Now, it wouldn't be in for another, 2.5 years until they'd actually sue Ripple. But doesn't that seem in line with what the expectation was back then? Even so, SEC clearly has bit off more than they can chew, right? John Deaton continues. At the same time, Mike also explained how he shorted XRP after seeing a spot on CNBC explain how to purchase. I'm not making any accusations, but I am suggesting that several people need to be asked relevant questions. 6 days before the speech on June 8th, 2018, Joseph Lubin said the following. we certainly need bodies like the SEC to scare many projects straight. That's a quote, folks. SEC needs to scare projects straight. Because he knew that Ethereum would be the chosen one by the SEC, despite the fact that it was the first ICO ever clearly in violation of securities laws. Clearly. It's just offensive, like the audacity of this man. To just like, oh, well, I'm in, just close the door behind me, the rest of you, everybody else in crypto, yeah, you're all screwed. That's basically it. The audacity of this man. No. John continues. From 2018 until present day, Lubin has been the SEC's biggest cheerleader, including disagreeing with Hester Peirce's criticism of the SEC. On June 14th, 2018, shortly after Hinman's speech, Lubin appeared on the same stage with Josh Constantine. He claims he, quote, wasn't able to read through Bill's entire speech, end quote, but asked if Hinman, quote, spoke about XRP at all, end quote. Josh says he didn't, and Lubin replies, quote, that's interesting. So this is why I was kind of wondering, like, I would love to see how the versions of this speech ultimately evolve. How is it the case that Joe Lubin, he's sitting there on stage, and he said again, wasn't able to read through Bill's entire speech? How did you have a printed copy of Bill's speech before he gave it anyway? What? Can we just not gloss over that first? You know what I'm saying? How the hell did you even have a copy? You didn't get to read all. Was there anything about XRP? You knew that there was nothing about XRP in it. And so I'm thinking that he did that just to be like, just pointing out, oh, XRP's not included. Well, that's interesting because it's a security. That's what he's trying to get at, presumably, right? Either that, or if he's genuinely curious, is it because XRP was included in an earlier version of the draft? Well, I'm not speculating that's the case. I'd actually be very surprised if that's the case. But you gotta wonder, what the hell was going through Lubin's mind? John continues. 6 days after Hinman's speech, Tim Draper told Gensler bankers are panicking right now about crypto's disruptive potential and predicts legacy finance players will sue, exert media pressure, and leverage regulators to try to slow its progress. Draper literally called it. And that's what has happened to this point. John continues. On June 26, 2018, Brad Garlinghouse noted that Coinbase announced 2 days before the Hinman speech that it was listing Ethereum Classic. Now, Brian Armstrong, of course, he's the CEO founder of Coinbase. Brian Armstrong isn't known for his boldness versus regulators. Why was he, like Novogratz and Tom Lee, so confident in an Ethereum free pass? But isn't the timing of that a bit strange? These are reasonable questions based off known facts. Doesn't that seem peculiar? I think it's fair to ask. It's perfectly fair to ask. John continues. 2 weeks after the speech, a jubilant Lubin tells Dominic Chu that he believes competitor Ripple is massively overvalued. Oh man, it's not a pop calling the kettle black, you know what I'm saying? Like, what? Ethereum, look, I am not anti-Ethereum. Ethereum is the first cryptocurrency I ever purchased. I still hold it. That was back in November of 2017. But it's just rich seeing, like, Ethereum, like, at least to this point, it doesn't even scale. And then he's got, again, the audacity to say what he's saying about Ripple and XRP specifically. So, I don't know what all of his motives are, but it seems to me to be completely ridiculous. An XRP functionally used in enterprise-grade software. How about that? Anyway, John Deaton continues. 2 months after the speech, Lubin said Clayton, quote, indicated they wouldn't be grandfathering anybody in, end quote. And that also, here's another quote from Lubin, the securities law issues are pretty close to resolved. And here's another quote, I think there are going to be some bad times for projects going forward. How about that? What do you think he knows, folks? Lubin said his thesis is that the SEC doesn't want to kill blockchain, in that it will do so entirely through positive statements about Bitcoin and Ethereum only. So folks, why do you think I think Joe Lubin's so thrilled to say all these great things about the SEC? Oh, SEC's fantastic, they're absolutely nailing it. Why is that? Because they're the golden child, effectively, and everything else, he doesn't even care, the door's closed right behind him. John continues. In September 2018, Lubin warned that, quote, a reckoning is coming from the SEC for certain projects. That's curious, isn't it? And he was right. Lubin stated only Bitcoin and Ethereum were declared non-securities, adding, quote, they have not said the same about other tokens, end quote. He stated Ripple's token wasn't provided similar clarity and claims to know the SEC will not find any token other than Bitcoin and Ether to be decentralized. So the below tweets finish this super long thread, but I wanted to show what can be proven via Twitter and YouTube. Imagine if we had the power of subpoena. We could check wallet addresses, bank records, emails, calendars, notes for meetings, trades, digital asset holdings, etc. And it is amazing how much has been dug up just by the XRP community. Just everyday people, just like me and you, everybody, just everyday humans, digging up all sorts of facts. All of this has come from the labor of people within the community. And so John Deaton's point isn't lost to me. Imagine if there were the power of subpoena, what might actually be uncovered. So we'll see. I'm still anxiously waiting to see what the judge ultimately decides regarding these 63 emails. Now, it was already settled back in January, but as you probably are aware at this point, I've been covering it as many others have. The SEC is basically re-arguing their case, which they're not even supposed to do. They've broken the local rules of the court apparently, in going about this the way that they have, but they're trying to get the judge to rethink whether or not to allow these 63 emails to get into the hands of Ripple. And again, it's just so desperate. What is in there? And the judge knows. The judge definitely knows because there was an in-camera review, so which means an in-person review of what's in this. So I would not be the least bit surprised if it's exculpatory and just ruins the SEC's case because they are so desperate to hide all of this. But I'd probably be willing to settle just for that. Because if it has what we suspect may very well be in there, that's all we need, frankly. And yes, the rest of the stuff, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be independent investigations, but at least for the purposes of getting this thing tied up in a nice little bow here, settling the SEC versus Ripple case, that might be sufficient, frankly.
So enjoy your day, everybody. I'm always here for you. Leave any comments or questions below, and be sure to subscribe. But thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you. Enjoy your day, and I always have your back. So thanks so much, everybody.